Here's your September 3rd, 2020 update on what's going on with the weather in Delmarva. The Storm Prediction Center, or the SPC, has issued a rather potent outlook for severe weather today. Now, while the main threat is going to be damaging winds, if you're in the orange, there's a tornado chance as well west of the Chesapeake. Now, that chance also spreads onto Delmarva, but the best chance is if you head over the Bay Bridge onto the western shore of Maryland. Now, in this video, I'll get into the timing, why today could bust like yesterday, or why storms could fire. Of today's storm is actually focused up north in Quebec, Canada. Now, you see that black circle up there in Quebec, that's the main northerly impulse wave, which should produce some rain and maybe some thunderstorms up in Quebec. Now, here on Delmarva and in Maryland, we're on the southern edge of that upper level trough moving north of us. Now, that should produce some thunderstorms, severe thunderstorms, and maybe even tornadoes. Now, as you can see, that area has been circled below. So that's pretty much the root cause of why today is a severe weather day. This part of the country loves to do to create severe thunderstorms, or just thunderstorms in general, is they feed off the Appalachian Mountains and Blue Ridge Mountains to the west to fuel that low-level jet. Now, that low-level jet is roughly about a mile above the surface. It's one of the more important parts in weather. It can be used for snow, severe thunderstorms, occasionally tropical systems, but let's just stick to severe weather. Now, usually what happens in the Great Plains is you have this low-level jet really ramp up around 2 or 3 o'clock, and then around 5 to 7 o'clock, and even towards sunset, these tornadic supercells fire in like Kansas and Oklahoma. Now, of course, we don't have that here because this is Maryland and the Delmarva. What usually happens, and it's happening today, is the low-level jet, which you need for thunderstorms, does not get going until the late evening towards sunset or dinner time. Now, those pinks and deep blues, that's the wind speed you want for storms to really get going and to become possibly tornadic. Now, this will spread eastward as that low-level jet ramps up from the mountains east towards here in the Delmarva. So any chance for any good storms that might produce tornadoes will most likely be after sunset, where you can't even see them. So please pay attention to those warnings and know what's going on, and most importantly, stay weather aware. Now, the low-level jet is going to be good enough to support tornadoes and rotating thunderstorms. And the better part of that area is going to be when it moves east into the DC area and just over the Bay Bridge. That's where the SPC has the highest outlook. Now, those areas, not everyone's going to see a tornado, not everyone's going to see a thunderstorm, but the best chance for those storms are going to be in the mid-afternoon when that jet really ramps up. And if they can be isolated, they will have the chance to produce tornadoes. 80% chance for a tornado watch, but that did not come to play. For a few reasons. Cloud cover, not a lot of rotation to the updrafts, not a lot of lapse rates, which creates some instability, and this reason, which is called the EML, or the elevated mix layer. Now, this is usually between 10 and 20,000 feet, but is most pronounced at 18,000 feet, or 500 millibars. Now, you want that at 40%, or those darker brown colors towards the greens, because if it's mixed, it's going to be fairly dry, which will allow those air particles to get separated. However, if they are not mixed, if the column is way too saturated or wet, which is what you see here, those greens and even blues up in New Jersey, you don't get a very well mixed area. Now, the EML is one of the more key aspects for thunderstorms to form. If there's not a lot of, if there's no EML, there could be a thunderstorm, but the chance is not as great. So that's another factor that's going to be possibly an inhibitor in making this not a very potent day, which some forecast models have been saying. I'll reach that later. Now, as you can see, this is right around sunset when that low-level jet really kicks in, and it's not really mixed. It's not forecasted to be mixed very well today. So that EML is not going to be very pronounced, which could be another factor why this day busts or doesn't really happen, which would be great. We don't want those dangerous thunderstorms to happen. Lapse rates is roughly a measure of how unstable the atmosphere is. It's one of two ways, that and CAPE, which I'll get to later in this video update. Lapse rates is pretty much the cooling of the atmosphere as you go up. Those grays and blues, those are usually between 4 and 2 Celsius, which is what you don't want. For good lapse rates, usually above 6.5 Celsius as you go up to 700 millibars or 10,000 feet. Now, this is usually used for hail. If you have good lapse rates, you'll have a better chance of seeing hail. Some might be large. I'm not expecting a ton of hail today because of those poor lapse rates. They are a factor, but if you have poor lapse rates, you can overcome them easily with CAPE, which we do have, and I will talk about those later today. So lapse rates, again, another inhibitor, but if you have enough CAPE, those can be easily overcome. Tornadoes will be northern Maryland and northern Virginia. So Loudoun County, Fairfax County, Montgomery County, Cale County, Prince George's County. Those places have the best spot for those surface-based storms. And if they get to the surface and get isolated, they will most likely produce those tornadoes. But that is a big if. So say where today, pay attention to those warnings. If those storms can get surface-based and get close enough to the ground, there is a chance for a tornado. Now, forecast guidance isn't really terribly consistent. Some models are saying this won't happen. This is the NAM 3K right around 5 o'clock tonight. Some are saying it's going to be nothing, but they all have some storms. Now, if that's more of a linear squall line shelf cloud or an isolated supercell, we don't know. But right around 3 to 4 o'clock, storms should be firing. So we should have a rough idea of what's going to happen. Let's talk about what's actually going on right now. Now, this video was recorded at 12:50 p.m., so things will probably change when this is out. But let's take a look at what's going on right now. You can see those southerly and southwesterly winds, which you generally want if you do like those severe thunderstorms. However, you may see them and say, oh, not a lot of wind barbs, those are weak. That usually happens. But you can see where those southwesterlies and southerlies do meet in southwest Virginia and parts of eastern West Virginia. That's where the directional wind shear is going to come. Now that should spread to the east and cause some more wind shear, which is going to produce maybe some tornadoes and definitely some thunderstorms right around the 3 to 6 o'clock hour. Let's talk about what is not going to be a problem. As of 12:50 this afternoon, the dew points in the target area were very supportive for thunderstorms, and those temperatures are more than enough. Those green numbers, those are the dew points, while the reds, those are the temperatures. Now, you usually want those values above 60 degrees. 65 is good, but 60 you can get away with in the warm season. As you can see, those dew points are very moist in the low to mid 70s, which will be more than enough to produce those thunderstorms. Yesterday, one of the main reasons why it busted, or no storms formed until after sunset, is because of the cloud cover. Now, when that discussion was issued for an 80% chance of a watch, it was relatively partly cloudy. But then it became cloudy and it just became way too stable to issue that watch. And turns out they were right on that. Now, as you can see, the current satellite is a little bit ominous. There is some clouds moving in. That's just some rain moving in Pennsylvania. Now those clouds are moving to the east northeast, so they should get into the forecast area. But I don't think there'll be a huge issue today. The service has had time to heat up. The instability will rise. So while there's going to be clouds, it is going to be a factor today in making it probably not as big as expected. I really don't think it's going to be as big of a problem as yesterday. Now we'll see what happens as those clouds move in, whether we get any breaks in the clouds. Because as we all know, or for those who don't know, the more you are in the sunshine, the better chance you have for daytime heating, which causes storms. Now you can see on the Delmarva, there is some sea breeze clouds forming. Those will go away in a couple hours, I'm sure. But Delmarva, the northern neck of Maryland, those are all sunshine. So that's where the better chance for the storms will most likely be. Recording this, it is about 1 o'clock, so by the time you are seeing this, it has guaranteed changed. So right now, we have this thing called CAPE, which is the convective available potential energy. It's pretty much what fuels storms. If you don't have CAPE, storms will most likely not form, unless you have an anomaly, which occasionally does happen. But let's get back on topic. So right now, those CAPE values are right around 1,500 to 2,000 joules per kilogram. Usually, you want those values above 1,000. If they're 2,000, they can overcome those poor lapse rates, which we have right now. So we'll have plenty of CAPE to supplement those poor lapse rates and create thunderstorms. Now this is how much oomph or energy storms have to get going. There's going to be a lot of instability or energy in the atmosphere for storms to really get going, and I would expect, again, right around 3 to 5 o'clock, you will likely see the storms going and might be tornadic if enough wind shear could get going. Now, speaking of wind shear, there's this thing called bulk shear. Now, usually, you want those values above 40 knots. You're looking at that now saying, oh, that's not very good. You only have 30 knots. Well, you see that pocket of 40 knots up in the neck of Maryland? That is going to move east according to the map. And look at that. 45 to 50 knots of bulk shear. That is going to be plenty enough shear to rotate those thunderstorms and produce supercells are likely, but tornadoes you got to see if that low-level shear is good. And for hours from now, bulk shear is even more supportive towards the Delmarva. That's right around 5, 6 o'clock. Now, just because the environment is good, this is around 7 o'clock tonight. Now, just because the environment is good enough, that doesn't really mean that storms will produce those tornadoes, because they, of course, have to get into that area. Now, this is current, so this will spread out. This will move east. And those bulk shear values are going to be more than enough to cause rotating supercells. Yes, it is a fairly high-end day. We don't see a 10% risk for any tornadoes here this far east. Now, yesterday they issued a very rare 10% outlook. It's pretty rare even in parts like Alabama and Oklahoma and Nebraska. And it's even more rare here out east in Maryland and the Delmarva. So yes, today does have the potential, if the atmosphere can cooperate, to really get going. However, as I mentioned, stuff like lack of helicity, not a lot of lapse rates, and possible cloud cover, and pretty much no EML could make this today a non-factor. However, that could change. In the coming hours, we will see SBC issue those mesoscale discussions, which is really, really good localized outlooks discussions, forecast how the environment is doing. Now, pay attention to those. Those will drive today's factors. If they say it looks good, like they might do today, then they should issue a tornado watch, I would imagine, from DC area, most likely all the way out to the Delmarva and possibly southern New Jersey. Now, not everyone, of course, is going to see a storm, or maybe no one's going to see a storm. No one might see a tornado, which would be great. However, if you do get that warning, go to the lowest floor. If you don't have a basement, go to the lowest room, which has no windows. If that's not an option, if you have windows in every single room on the lowest floor, get into a very tight area and cover yourself. Now, I'm not saying there's going to be any like EF5s today. There's probably going to be some warnings, but how big, we don't know. It's most likely going to be well, I mean, today's a pretty decent event. I mean, you have enough shear, you have enough instability. Now, whether that gets going, whether that beats the inhibitors, like I mentioned, lapse rates, maybe even some cloud cover and helicity. And helicity is the rotating updrafts. If it can separate the rain from the updrafts. Now, if you don't have helicity, the chance of any rotating storms is a little decreased, but there is enough wind shear to combat that. Now, we'll see how today goes. I will be, of course, on Twitter updating. And as always,